Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. I'm excited to be joined today by Brandon, co-founder of Mindfort, a YC-backed company with autonomous AI security testing that continuously finds and validates vulnerabilities in web applications. Brandon, great to have you on the show.
Likewise, thanks for having me, Tyler.
Of course, yeah. Excited to get into it. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing before Mindfort. What was the start? Where did you come up with the idea? And was the start of Mindfort YC? What was that experience like? And maybe take us through that.
Totally. So I've always been a big believer in AI before language models and like applying it to cybersecurity. There's a lot of semantic meaning in cybersecurity data that was like kind of lost before. So very early on, I was working on another startup where we were trying to use natural language processing with convolutional neural networks to detect phishing and malware and like network packets in real time. Um, it didn't work because CNNs and like just natural language processing back then just weren't up to what they are today with like transformer architecture models. But like the idea of like capturing the semantic meaning and like making security decisions off that like never left me. Um, I went to go work at two great security companies. One is called Project Discovery, where I led a product, built basically a DAS, a dynamic application security scanner, based on their open source tool from the ground up. And then I left to join a company called NetSpy, which is like one of the biggest pen testing companies in the US, where I was, leading the product development of their pen testing platform. And then later on the AI team over there, where we were building AI tools for human pen testers. So for me, this idea that we had this big problem in security, which is like web applications are very complicated and there's a lot of semantic meaning embedded in them, but programmatic tools, weren't great at finding vulnerabilities in them. So the other option, if you're not using a scanner like Project Discovery, was to go to a pen testing firm like NetSpot. And it's great because you can pay for like really experienced humans to come in and do a pen test against your web app. They'll find lots of stuff, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's arduous to set up. It's hard to like offer it as a SaaS subscription if you want to get it done all the time. So as this is like 2 years ago now, like as AI started progressing and getting better, I realized, we could probably do this with AI. So I actually met my co-founder Akul through reading some of his research.
That's
And
awesome.
we got I just like read his research papers on
It's a cool way to find a co-founder.
it was like really like stupid, honestly, because I I just kind of was like, I need to see who else in the world is like thinking this way. This was like before, like right after the ChatGPT moment. It wasn't like, agents weren't a thing in people's common language yet. um and my co-founder Akul, he's like written and co-authored some of the top papers in like ICML and ACL, like on doing autonomous pen testing, finding vulnerabilities in web apps. So I saw his name popping up on all these papers, and I was like, I gotta call this guy. And we got to speaking, and we both kind of immediately clicked, and we're like, yeah, like we should build this because like he's an engineer, and like I was a product guy. And the question was never what do we build? It was just how do we build it? We're very aligned on like from the beginning, like what Mindfort needed to be. So he graduated school, I quit my job, and we got to work and we started working on this idea. Uh, and we were lucky that we got into YC early on in that journey for the X25 batch. And that was like one of the craziest experiences of both of our lives to like get into YC. I think I had previously applied to YC 7 times with other startup ideas like throughout the years. And, like it's always a Hail Mary because you're like,
Totally.
it's like it's so hard to get in, right? But I think what happened is we were finally like solving a real problem, and the tech was like actually maturing at the same time. And our partner, Nicolas Desange, he saw like the vision really early on, like when we were speaking to him. And YC was very like happy to have us. And it was kind of a whirlwind experience, like moving up to the Bay, just not leaving our little apartment in Dogpatch for
Oh
like,
yeah.
60 days, right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, which was like
Type
awesome,
2
right? Because
fun.
like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
look back on,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Like you like put everything else in your life aside for like 75 days. And it's wild because like everything just goes to the back burner and like it becomes like your priority. And like that's why YC is so effective, I think. Um, but I mean, and tell me, Tyler, what you think of this too. Like, I'm curious. For us, the most surprising thing that we learned at YC is like how little like how few tricks there are to actually starting a great company. Like there's
Totally.
nothing they don't tell us anything special that's like, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just they tell you that the secret is there is no secret, and like you
totally.
have to do the hard work and like build something people want.
Yeah, that was honestly a bit, I mean, you're kind of sad that there isn't some magic secret, but it's also refreshing. Like, I think we both are from LA. I didn't grow up
Yeah.
like in the Bay with YC around. And so I had a little bit of skepticism of like how much of this is like, hype. And a lot of people like to, try to put YC down, from the outside and things like that. I was
Yeah.
so surprised at how grounded founders were, partners were. They weren't telling you to raise like the most amount of money you ever can. They totally were saying focus on your users and building product, not like, and so yeah, definitely resonate with that. And to your point, maybe the only trick is like focus and yeah, just like that grind. Like they really help set you up for that. They even say, to your point, YC is almost an excuse to focus on,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
this. And so
Don't
yeah,
go to your friend's wedding. Don't help your cousin move, or some of the
totally.
examples they gave. Yeah.
And it's a sacrifice, but like it
Totally.
also is hard to make a startup successful. And so I think it's, I'd rather have an honest advisor tell me like this is what it takes than to, think that you can balance and juggle a lot of things. I want to make sure I capture like a couple of things that you shared about your journey that I think are pretty interesting. Sounds like there's a couple like lucky moments, I'll call them. I don't think it's actually luck, and I'll get into that. But like you finding your co-founder through a research paper, you both having aligned vision, and then the other thing is like knowing what you want to build from the beginning. A lot of founders, and this is a fine path too, they start with great skills, but not like an idea or not like the idea for exactly what product they're going to build. And so that feels pretty unique about what you guys experienced. And just to close out my rant, I feel like there's we're very lucky to have gotten into YC. We're lucky to have the opportunities we have, but you also have to like put yourself in the way of that luck. Like you're out there reading research papers to happen to find your co-founder, right?
Yeah.
You applied to YC multiple times. It wasn't the first time you got in. So I think that's a really an interesting story that's probably pretty thematic for like a lot of founders experiences. It like sounds like it's an overnight success, but
it's not.
you spend years doing it and then you have the
Yeah.
overnight success. Yeah.
Totally. Like I'll tell you another one too that was really this one has to be luck, but it was great because again I put myself in the way of that luck. I was not a classically trained software engineer. I was always like very technical. I was always like hacking things from a very young age, but I wasn't a CS major. Like I went to school for poli sci, and my like hobby, my passion growing up was always like tech. Like, I built a little data center in my basement. I like hacked the Starlink terminal one time. Like I have a million Raspberry Pis, but I could never do like production engineering. And then I was stuck in this place where I had so much technical knowledge about like how these systems worked and like even like good principles and practice of like coding design and like systems design, but I couldn't write code well to like apply it. And then AI got good at writing code, and I became so well positioned to be good at like what is ostensibly now called like vibe coding. Like I think of myself as like a professional vibe coder because I'm not just like, hey Claude, go build that thing, right? I can like give it deep technical detail and guidance to fill in the gap where I couldn't code well before. So I think I got incredibly lucky in doing that. Like that was a huge reason as I think why we got into YC as well, is because we were able to build a prototype with like, this was like Cursor version 1 and like Sonnet 3.5. And we ground the hell out of that thing, and we built our like MVP alpha, and it was enough to like convey the vision of what we wanted to build to the world, because to us it was very clear. We have this vision of, and we'll talk about that too, is like we want to build this platform that lets people deploy agents and then have them just continuously and relentlessly hack them before an actual hacker finds a vulnerability.
Well, that's a great segue. You were mentioning like vibe coding and the advent of that, and how people like you now are, who have technical background, have domain expertise in something like cybersecurity, can now go and build their vision. I imagine that also creates, you mentioned production grade code. I imagine that creates a lot of issues where cybersecurity is not the foreground of these vibe coders' mind. Is this trend, am I capturing this trend correctly? Like, do you see that there's a lot more security issues with software now? And then where does Mindfort come in to help with that?
Our fastest growing customer segment is Series A, Series B startups, and like recently funded seed companies that are kind of like moving really fast, because people are vibe coding and AI is good at doing code security. There's a lot of great code security companies out there, but code bases are so complex and context windows can only fit so much in them. And like AI, no matter how good it gets, it's not going to predict the like interactive outcome of all of the code in your code base without compiling it at runtime and like actually running the code. And there's a lot of things that you can't detect in a code base when doing a security review. Like you have to look at the application, because there's like your Cloudflare WAF, right? It's like how you deploy it across Amazon and Railway and whatever you're using, right? Like for Cell. So, doing penetration testing live in production is really important. And people are vibe coding a ton right now, and then also seeing that AI like can't catch everything in code review. So yeah, it's been blowing up with the number of folks that come to us, and it helps drive revenue at a lot of the companies that we serve, because they're able to go to their customers and say, we take security very seriously.
Yeah.
You can have confidence that we test our stuff rigorously, not just code review.
Yeah.
And we've seen our customers many times close big deals because they were able to say, hey, here's our pen test report. Here's our attestation that we get continuously tested with these agents. And it's great. It's a great story.
I love that continuous testing sounds like a key word there, because you mentioned before that like traditional pen test agencies, aren't set up to do that. I want to make sure we don't go too far into like, talking about cybersecurity without understanding at a very high level. I'm sure we could spend a whole episode on it, but like, what is it? So I'm a Vibe Code founder. I have an idea for an app. I'm about to go apply to YC, or maybe I have some early customers. Like, what are like one or two concepts that I need to know of? I'm sure the solutions probably use Mindfort, but like what still I would want to know, like maybe what is pen testing, or like what's the biggest vulnerability? I don't know. What would you share as like quick tidbits at a high level for someone who doesn't know about cybersecurity, like what they should care about?
Totally. And I'll tell you this right now, when we're the first people to like say this, is that you can get a long way with like Cloud Code. You can do your own pen testing, right? And we encourage people to do that. Adversarially, like look at your application and try to break it. What that looks like in practice is literally just like put your application up, host it, and then ask Cloud Code, hey, here's my application URL. Let's do a security review live. And it'll walk you through the steps and tell you, hey, let's look at your API security. Let's make sure you don't have any, S3 buckets that are sitting there, uncovered. Let's make sure that like your application does authentication properly. Like one of the biggest vulnerabilities we see with vibe coded apps especially is a vulnerability called IDOR, insecure direct object, which basically means if I'm logged in as user 1, I can access, just by changing the variable, user 2's data, because I'm authenticated as a user, but the authentication between accounts might be misconfigured or broken, right? And you can get more complicated with that, as like there's many complex objects and relationships, and oftentimes we see like these gaps in authentication protection. So looking for things like that, like actually testing your application and trying to break it, is you can get very far at making sure you don't have any glaring holes. We'll do it for you if it's too complicated. We're happy to help, right? And maintaining that security over time gets complicated, and that's where Mindfort really shines. But those are like some of like the big things to look for when you're building an app.
Amazing. Those are some great
Yeah.
like getting started tips, and I'm sure that also like starts to teach you as Claude's walking you through it, as you're starting to see these vulnerabilities. Okay, this is what I need to look out for as I'm
Yeah.
developing or vibe coding, and then maybe educates people too of like, okay, now I understand why I need something like Mindfort. Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about like agents, AI, and how like where does it exist in Mindfort's product? Maybe at a very high level, are users interacting directly with an agent that they're having a conversation with? Does it happen in the background? And like, why does AI make sense for pen testing, or are there places that it doesn't make sense still?
Totally. Great question. So the way that we built Mindfort is it's primarily kicking off like background agents that run completely autonomously, right? So what it looks like when you join Mindfort is you point us at your web application, you tell us the URL, you give us credentials to be able to log into that application, and then our agents take it from there. And they spend many hours doing their own like work, and we orchestrate like many agents, many tools, multiple layers to do that efficiently and to do that with great coverage. So you're testing like almost everything in the application, and then you do that continuously. You just like repeat that process, and um, yeah, we spent a lot of time, and we think one of our biggest advantages is actually our agentic engineering, like how we put our agents together to do this the right way. Um, if I could digress
Yeah,
into the model side, and
yeah, go
I
for
think
it.
probably folks would find this interesting. We actually thought early on that having the right AI model would help, like having a fine-tuned model that was really good at pen testing. Um, and I might be wrong on this, but what it's turning out to be is that it's actually more important to have great agents, great data. Like that is just traditional engineering. It's just like doing the right work, figuring out the product experience. And we'll talk about that too in a sec. It's like, what's the right product to deliver to the customer? If you can have great agents, but if you're not solving a problem, it doesn't matter. And like just doing pen tests with agents isn't it. I can tell you that, like from the early days when we were, iterating, it wasn't just like, taking off because like now AI does the pen test. Um, but in terms of the engineering side, like having excellent agents that are really good at solving the problem is really, really hard. And there's like a lot, I think a company can build a really good moat around having the best agents for that specific niche, like whatever that, their business is. And I think that's hard to replicate. Like, yeah, there's a lot of like great frameworks out there for agent harnesses. You have LangGraph, Crew AI, like there's a million of them. But
Hmm.
putting it together in a production application, orchestrating many layers together, doing this with like durable execution, like long running stateful jobs is like really hard. And then bringing the right context in at the right time, managing context windows, um, it's no small feat. And that's what we really excel at. But
I
we think
think we
that the
share.
model layer, yeah.
Yeah, no, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, like, but last thing to wrap up my rant on it is like we think that the actual model layer, intelligence will become ubiquitous, and it'll probably go to zero or pretty close to it. That's open source models, Opus, GPT-5, whatever you take your pick. They'll all be good enough at some point.
Totally. I think I've got to second that. My co-founder and I have kind of started our company with the same kind of thinking. It was kind of tiresome, frankly, like that, like every customer's like, well, but do you have this model or that? And we're like, no, what matters is
Don't
the
worry
busy
about it.
work around it. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like traditional software. Like, oh, did you give the agent the right tools? Does that tool fail? Do you need to like, scale up the system to handle more traffic, or, do you need more agents running at once? It's not like the model matters. Don't get me wrong. There's
Yeah.
some, but I think over time, to your point, they're going to converge. So I
Hmm.
know you probably can't share like, a ton of details around how you've set up your agentic framework. But you reference some of those like out of the box frameworks and harnesses. Do you use
Yeah.
any of them? Is there
Hmm.
anything you can tell us at a high level of like what people should think about? Is it all about making sure that, you give it the right context, or is it making sure that it has less than 10 tools? I don't know. What have you found when it comes to building like good agent systems?
Yeah.
That's important for people to know.
Yeah. I think I actually share like a fair bit about like the learnings that we've had. And, like, we think it's important that we help people understand this. Um, agents are really like the agents you're building. It really depends on, again, what your task is. You'll see there's a lot of great um, information out there on building good general agents, like from Anthropic themselves, the Anthropic engineering blog. They share a ton of really, really battle tested things on how to build great agents. And if you just follow that advice, which seems a little basic, you will get very far, right? And it applies to whatever frameworks you choose. Let's just take LangGraph as an example. Cursor's engineering blogs are incredible. They also give away a ton of good stuff on how to build great agents and like how they do it and their learnings. But it's really about that like last 10% is like optimizing it to your specific task. And the name of the game is bringing in and grounding the agents with the right context at the right time, right? So it depends on what you're doing. Let's say you're like building a DevOps agent, right? You need to make sure that the agents have access to build logs and the right tools to like bring a deployment up and take a deployment down, but not overload the context window, right? And like, there's a lot of work that's coming out now about how you should treat information as like a file system. Like when a tool outputs logs, for example, like logs for a deployment, save that as a file in a file system instead of injecting that directly into a context window. And like, so, this field is like constantly evolving and we're constantly updating our agents to be on that cutting edge. But then we also find that there are some things that, if the model is really good, it's actually quite fault tolerant to you building shitty agents. Funnily enough, like it'll like overcome your terrible like code and still be pretty good. So it's all about just like making sure that they have the right context and removing any obvious blockers from their path. Like you will go extremely far in building agents by just doing those two things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I honestly would love to keep talking about this. We'll have to do like another episode at some point because it sounds like you guys have like a wealth of information, but I know we're getting close to time. One more question before we get into like a bit about Mindfort and how people can follow along and check you out. Now, a lot of companies are finally getting to they've been marketing that they have agents for a while now, or that they have AI features, and they're finally really getting to part of those promises. And now people are struggling with, okay, I vibe tested, whether that's on security, whether it's on usability, like these agents locally, but my users use it so much differently. And then once you start scaling up to multi-agent systems, like how do you keep track of all of that? How do you make sure it's working without waiting for your customers to tell you something's going wrong? What's your guys' approach to that? You mentioned like you kick off like multiple agents in the background. I'm assume you're not expecting your customers to like audit every agent's performance because that's part of the value of the product. How do you guys keep an eye on it? Or is it still a challenge that the community is trying to figure out? Like, how do we monitor agents in production and improve them over time?
Yeah, monitoring agents in production is an ongoing field of improvement. Like it's come a long way. We're big fans of LangFuse for traceability. They do a great job at wrangling what is just like a ton of data that is emitted by our like systems at any one time. But it's still ongoing. There's still a lot of different ways to trace what your agents are doing and like work backwards and debug. If you use a good agent framework, there's also kind of like state saving tools that are usually built in that if you really want to get like hands dirty, you can kind of go through those and build your own observability. Just having great live logs too really helps. Just like standard out like is your friend. And then I'll also shout out a great company whose product we use called Light LLM, which lets us kind of set up our own. Folks are really familiar with like Open Router. That's just a proxy that you can proxy other models in, and then it normalizes to a single OpenAI API compatible endpoint. We run Light LLM internally. It's enormously helpful at kind of normalizing this so that like at least every AI call is the same.
Nice.
And that helps us debug the agents. That also helps us like, bring in whatever the best models are at any one time. When we deploy our own models, like makes it really simple to just kind of switch in and out. So I'd highly recommend, having great tools and observability like that, that stack. So like LangFuse, Light LLM, and then really good, option to view your standard out, whether that's, using Grafana and Prometheus or, CloudWatch, right? If you get it set up the right way. And it's just it's a lot of reading right now. So I'm waiting for the day that agents can debug, their own traces. And I think Langfuse is working on an MCP integration to let agents do just that, the right context, so it's not overloaded, but we'll get there.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again, Brandon, for sharing all these insights. You're very generous with sharing what you guys have learned. I'm sure it's like tons of reading research papers, tons of testing. So you're saving a lot of folks a lot of time. I want to put your website up on the screen. It's Mindfort.ai, and maybe share with the audience, like, who should check out Mindfort at what stage, and what's the best way to follow along or get in contact.
Yeah. We're on LinkedIn, Brandon Vise and Akul Gupta. Like, we're very vocal and we're out there in the community. So if you guys had any questions about anything, like, just feel free to just get in touch with us. If you are a company that's, building your software, you're starting to grow a number of users, or you're going for like enterprise customers, we really recommend getting in touch with us, or just simply signing up. We have a self-service platform that lets you sign up and get a pen test within 15 minutes. And if you're a larger team with a bigger footprint, a lot of applications, maybe some legacy applications, we also have an enterprise team that can help, deploy Mindfort in your organization where it makes sense, to help you get that like overall coverage of all your assets, and get that continuous pen testing underway. So we make it super easy. And again, I just recommend just go to our website, mindfort.ai. And regardless of your stage, we've got a solution to help you keep your application secure.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for the time, Brandon. Everyone, check out Mindfort, and I'm looking forward to continuing to follow along with what you guys build and have you back on the pod in the future.
I'd love to do it. Thanks so much for having me, Tyler.
Awesome. Have a good day. Later, Brandon.
Likewise.